I've been on YouTube for a few years now, and while it feels like I'm only now starting to find my stride, I still hold a special connection to where I got started by looking at superhero games, or Spider-Man games specifically. But ever since I did those videos, there's one set of titles that people have been begging me to look at, and since Digimon World 2 is going to take a while to get a video put together for, I figured now was a good time to actually sit down and look at the best games starring the Caped Crusader. The Arkham games hold a kind of special place among superhero titles. While you had some hits here and there that people really came to love, the vast majority of video games based on tight-wearing crime fighters were either rushed licensed titles meant to tie in with a film's release, or more original ventures that sadly, more often than not, never really rose above mediocre territory, or in worse cases, have been laughingstocks in the industry for ages. Batman himself didn't really seem to have a great track record for games either. I can't say I've played many of them myself, but I do plan to change that in the future, cause you never know what you're gonna find out there. But the Arkham series changed the landscape of how developers approach games for not only The Dark Knight, but for most superheroes and honestly, even other games in general. What was it about this game that stayed in the minds of players well over a decade after it was released, that helped influence other titles around it in interesting ways, or helped change the landscape of superhero games in general? Spoilers ahead, it's time to dig in deep to the twisted depths of Batman: Arkham Asylum. Kinda funny to think about it, but this project could have wound up as a movie tie-in to promote 2008's The Dark Knight, but there simply wasn't enough time to get something together for that film's release, and the team was given a bit more free reign. They were still tasked with working on a Batman game, but this time it wasn't going to be a strict adaptation of a movie or comic run, though I'm convinced it did take at least a few ideas from one comic in particular, but we'll get there. What we had here was an original story that took some elements from the Batman animated series, namely voice actors like Kevin Conroy as Batman, Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, and of course, who can forget Mark Hamill returning to his role as the Joker.
There's no escape, Joker.
Silly bat! I don't want to escape. I'm having way too much fun.
We even had Paul Dini coming in to help put together the story for the game, a seasoned writer who worked, again, on the animated series, but also had experience with DC Comics as well. This wasn't the first good superhero game to have its own original story or goals, but the budget, the effort, the marketing, the detail, this all just had something else going for it we simply didn't see up to that point. The idea was to create a game about the worst night of Batman's life as he finds himself trapped in the Elizabeth Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane, dodging danger at every turn as many of the most dangerous enemies he's ever fought throughout the years are set loose and are all intent on getting revenge on the man who sent them there. This is the first thing the game gets right. The premise of the game is actually pretty simple and straightforward, but the setting of the title has so much potential for the events that can be presented to the player throughout their journey. What sort of classic Batman foes will he encounter? How can the Dark Knight traverse through this dangerous place on his own and roll with the punches? That said, maybe it's not enough to just have an endless gauntlet of baddies to throw down with. There still needs to be some form of central focus, a goal to achieve as your enemies try to stop you, and predictably, the main man orchestrating this whole event is none other than the clown prince of crime himself, the Joker. The adventure begins with Batman pulling up to Arkham Asylum, handing his most famous enemy over to the authorities. As they strap him up to take him down to his cell though, the Caped Crusader gets the impression that something is wrong and decides to follow along as the clown is carted deeper into the facility. When I picked this game back up, I had mixed feelings about this section. On the one hand, while yes, you do get to control Batman as he walks along this corridor with the other characters, it's still a fairly hands-off experience that mostly just tries to build up a little bit of what you're going to see, some of the background details that led to the events taking place, and helps to set the mood of the adventure ahead. But on the positive side, yeah, it does all those things. When returning to this intro on a repeat playthrough, it's easy to feel railroaded and like you're wanting to get on with the actual gameplay, but if you're picking up this Batman simulator in the first place, you're probably someone who already has an investment in this universe and with these characters, and as any comic fan can tell you, the action surrounding these characters is often only as good as the context around them, and this section does a good job at just building a bit of excitement for what's to come. Like, it really helps build up that the prison is not in a normal state even before the takeover, as a fire at Blackgate Prison causes tons of Joker's crew to be transferred into the asylum just before Batman arrived there, amping up just how lethal this place is about to become.
Tell me something. You've never let me catch you this easily. What are you really after?
Oh, nothing much. Hundreds dying in pain and fear. All their meaningless lives brought to a horrifying conclusion.
All thanks to you and a book of matches. Was that the answer you wanted?
It's also not really that long. It takes just a few minutes and a lot of what's going on here is still entertaining in its own right. And honestly, having even this minimal control makes it a bit more fun than if you were just watching it all in a static cutscene. It also helps that the Joker is a central focus here, and I just kinda like it when he's on screen.
There seems to be.
Need to take my temperature? I'd be happy to drop my pants.
He's all yours. Get him out of here.
Once they get the clown ready for transfer, everything seems safe for just a brief moment until he springs into action and takes out the guards.
Hurry, we're losing him,
The joke's on you.
His plan is already in motion, and he's taken his first step at raining hell on the asylum, opening the floodgates for Gotham's deadliest to roam free, and Batman is here at the center of it all. This is where we're first introduced to one of the best things this game has to offer, something everyone got a taste for in the early demos and would inspire similar mechanics in its peers with varying levels of emulating success: combat.
Welcome to the madhouse, Batman! I set a trap and you sprang it gloriously! I've got guests flying in from all over Arkham! You'll see!
There's a simple but smooth feel to this combat style, but depending on how you approach it, this can become one of those systems that's easy to pick up, but difficult to master, or at least requiring a certain level of attention and reflex to pull off well. As thugs start to surround you, you can start swinging punches at them and dish out some damage, but while you do so, you'll want to pay attention as a flash will appear above some of their heads, and oh boy, I wonder what other superhero that effect reminds me of. When this flash appears, you'll want to hit the top face button to counter their attack and automatically respond with one of your own. This action and reaction free flow nature is the lifeblood of this game's combat. Punch a bad guy, wait for one of his other buddies to come at you, and counter their advance. As you get deeper into the game, your opponents will start to pack a few new tricks to add into the combat cycle. Now they're pulling stuff off the walls to throw at you and you have to dodge them instead of countering. Now they have knives and you have to use your cape to stun them before you can attack, or you'll get hit with their weapons, or they're holding stun batons and you have to vault over them and attack them from behind, or they'll tase you. Eventually, they start getting access to guns during the fights and you'll have to prioritize them and disarm them before they can shoot you. Fighting crooks becomes more challenging, but also more fun as they begin to mix in new ways to come at you, new elements you have to account for while taking them on. You can begin to unlock new abilities, like after building up enough hits in your combo meter, you can use an instant finisher, unleashing a move on any basic enemy regardless of what they're armed with, meaning you can even kind of strategize how you want to target and react to each enemy on the field and dispose of them in the safest and most efficient way. This stuff feels so good, and I mean, it's not perfect. There are times I saw Batman flailing off to whack a completely different guy than the one I was actually trying to target. But for the most part, this works really well, remarkably even. Other games have tried to more or less copy how this is done. Some handled it well, and others were a little more sloppy about it. I remember hearing about this test where people would just alternate between the attack and counter buttons and basically just glide through enemies when a game uses this setup, but the strategy is going to get you killed in this game, with a variety of enemies ensuring you need to actually fight intelligently and pay attention to your surroundings. Even more so on the hard difficulties, where they take that little flash away from the enemies that are about to attack you, so you have to rely entirely on your ability to read their movements and their animations. Now, mind that I said basic enemies. There are some larger fish to fry. As Joker takes off and starts brewing something in the background of all these events, it's clear that he has some larger goal in mind than just taking over the asylum. A lot of this stuff is just distraction as we start seeing a clearer image of what he's really up to, as he starts unleashing mutated prisoners on the Bat using something called the Titan formula to empower them and make them stronger, more like monsters than they are men. Now, on the occasion that you have to take on one of these guys, they're not too complicated. Dodge their attacks, wait for them to charge at you, and throw a batarang at them and they'll hit a wall, dazing themselves and leaving themselves open for attack. Rinse and repeat until they become very good friends with the floor. When they start to get kind of annoying is when they're mixed in with a group of other enemies and you have almost two entirely different different fighting styles kind of overlapping with each other. It's not impossible, but juggling these takes a bit more skill than other encounters in the game, and they can at times feel like a brief but ever-present difficulty spike. That said, it is pretty funny when you get to grapple one of the Titans and make them swing around at all the smaller bad guys. You can't make me not love that. Arkham Asylum's combat is very well tuned, and it's no wonder it's still one of the first things people think of when the series is brought up. But to take on everything this prison is going to throw at him, Batman needs more than brute force. He also needs to utilize the element of surprise. Batman is not the only target of the asylum's inmates, and at times he'll be faced with hostage situations where he needs to lay low, stay quiet, and sneak through the environment to approach each enemy undetected and take them off the board. Of course, you can sneak up from behind them and do a little stealth takedown, but you need to use the environment itself to your advantage, like crawling through these vents or grappling to gargoyles laden throughout the old structures of the building. The thugs in these stealth rooms are usually armed, and if they spot you, they won't waste any time before opening fire. If you think you could just tank the bullets and knock them out before they take you down, you are wrong. Just like with combat, these encounters start to become more and more difficult, as sometimes they'll just start killing their hostages the moment they see you, or they'll have these little collars that start sounding off when their heart rate gets too low, so even knocking them out quietly will alert the thugs around them. In time, they'll catch on to the fact that you're using gargoyles to get around, and they'll start rigging them with explosives, so you can only use them once and very briefly before they go off. You can use something called detective mode to give yourself an edge during these encounters. In most areas, it's a visual overlay Batman can use to highlight certain substances or key objects, like showing the alcohol on a man's breath to track him down. But around enemies, it can show you an X-ray that reveals the location of every thug and can even separate the ones that are armed. This becomes a crucial tool in carefully and safely dealing with these dangerous encounters with finesse. The stealth is exciting. You really feel like a predator let loose on these guys. You still have to be smart about it, but little stuff like this move you can unlock where you hang down from one of the gargoyles and suddenly snatch up one of the unsuspecting guards is just wildly satisfying. But what about moving between all these moments of creeping in the shadows or knocking heads around? Traversal around Arkham Asylum itself is actually not that unlike a Metroid title. In fact, progression through the game was directly inspired by games like Metroid and Zelda. I think I sort of lean a little closer to Metroid in my mind on this one, cause it's all set in one major area that you become increasingly more familiar with and in control of as you advance through the game. The asylum itself is so beautifully realized in this title. The creepy gothic architecture, the ambience, music, and sounds, the choking atmosphere that just fills you with this sense that the place you're in is dangerous. This is actually why I prefer playing the game on the 360 versus on modern systems. There was a version for both Arkham Asylum and its sequel, Arkham City, that were made for the PS4 and Xbox One. And I do also have the PC version, but that's because they were on sale for like $3, and I have no actual experience with them. These ports are functional. I mean, I don't want to talk them down too much, but while they do have a boost in resolution and even frame rate depending on some factors, the lighting, man, is just not right. Where the first title in the series is concerned, I legitimately think the original release just looks better. And it is mostly the lighting. The original game is darker, and maybe the models looked a little grittier too? The characters can look downright goofy while talking regardless of the version, but some models like the Joker just look more menacing in the original, and the shadows are so much more apparent in this first release. I think the remaster for Asylum misses the mark on the visual atmosphere, and considering that's one of the most important parts of what makes this game so memorable, it's not great, guys. It's funny too, because the developers have noted that BioShock was a direct inspiration behind this title's atmosphere, and I'll say right now, BioShock is one of the greatest games I have ever played, and the City of Rapture is unmatched. And I am still upset that we don't have a VR version of this game. Please let that statement age poorly. But the BioShock games also got some remasters for the later generation of systems, and I think they nailed the look, capturing what made the atmosphere of their preceding versions shine so much. So was this just a rushed job or what? If you're going into this for the first time, just play the 360 or PS3 versions. I suppose you could also go for the PC, especially if there's a mod out there or something that gets the original visual feel back, but then you're missing out on these glasses that came with the game for the 3D mode. Oh no, wait. Wait, don't put those on. This may not be the most original descriptor in the world, but Arkham Asylum as a location comes to feel like something of a character of its own. The further you go into its depths, the more you begin to uncover about the facility's history, its very nature. As new events start to unfold, the landscape will change. You'll see fewer Arkham guards patrolling, or even more accurately, fewer living ones, as Joker's men start to take over new sections of the island bit by bit. Or maybe some of the more unhinged prisoners start running around, or plants start to completely take over after Poison Ivy escapes and a sort of feud begins between her and the Joker. Even when returning to old areas, there will often be parts of it that weren't the way they were before, adding to the amount of life the location holds. But you also gain new ways to explore those older areas as well. As you progress, you'll obtain new gadgets through various means, like traveling into a small, secret sort of emergency bat cave that Batman established on Arkham Island, grabbing something out of the trunk of the Batmobile, or just crashing the Batwing through a building to drop off a gadget. And no, Batman never utilizes the jet like this again. Maybe he figures most situations he comes across require a little more finesse so hostages don't get hurt or something, but this just crashing through the glass is so jarring compared to how he handles everything else. I love it. You obviously have batarangs from the get-go and have an unlimited amount. Again, good for dazing titans. They can distract or harm armed guards, cut tethers, dropping thugs into deadly Joker toxin. Wait, Batman, what the hell? Yeah, sure. Unconscious. You can also get the explosive gel, which Batman spreads on a surface. He even draws it as a little bat symbol, it's adorable, and detonate it to destroy certain structures like weakened walls or floors. It can also knock unaware goons unconscious, or at least incapacitate them for a few moments. I mean, it should probably do more than that. Unless Batman is making this stuff out of some kind of magical material, I don't see how an explosion with this level of force isn't lethal to a squishy little human being at point blank range. There's also a remote control batarang that I totally forgot existed in this first title, I'm not gonna lie. I'll talk about it more in Arkham City. The cryptographic sequencer, which you can use to hack through stuff like locking devices to shut down force fields and access new areas. This is operated by rotating the analog sticks until the screen is green. It's very easy, and anyone who's ever told you otherwise is lying. The sonic batarang is actually pretty useful. You can throw it, and when it lands, it lets off the same frequency as one of those noisy collars, drawing in the attention of a thug. This can be super helpful when you need to separate a group and pick off people one by one. The bat claw is another really helpful item that can be used to grab stuff like vents and yank them off the wall, or you can upgrade it later so you can pull down destructible walls that might be out of reach for the gel, or even pull the floor out from under thugs in some areas. You can also pull multiple goons off of ledges with the upgraded claw, and I only ever used this once, when they tell you that you can do that. Another tool I kept forgetting about but did later find more use for is the line launcher, which allows Batman to line himself up as long as there's a wall both ahead and behind him and create a zip line that he can travel across. Batman can glide in this game, but if you need to go straight across without losing your altitude, using the line launcher like this can get you to some otherwise impossible to reach locations. You're doing a little more with these gadgets than just getting from one plot point to the next though, as there's plenty of fun little secrets to find or to collect throughout the title. The Riddler doesn't show up physically in this title, but he set up challenges all across the island for the Batman to find, likely hoping to overwhelm the detective to the point of conceding that the Riddler is his intellectual superior. He'll hack into your earpiece while you explore, taunting you with clues or doubting your ability to solve his little puzzles. These range from collecting simple little trophies that might be hiding behind walls, inside of vents, that sort of thing, which usually require the use of your various gadgets to obtain. The other puzzles will require the use of detective mode. One of the more simple variations is finding these big question mark patterns that you have to line up and hold the detective mode button to scan them. These are fine for the most part. The only issue I have with them is that they can be really picky about being perfectly aligned before he can actually give you the win. There are also simple little challenges like you just needing to destroy all of the annoying little chattering teeth strewn throughout each area. The final variation is probably the most creative, where entering a room will present you with a clue to some sort of puzzle, and the solution is usually going to be an homage or reference to a character from the comics. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind is that if you notice a reference to a character, just scan it. It's likely a riddle. I go out of my way for these with every playthrough. There's such a rewarding feeling to becoming more and more familiar with the locations and solving every challenge the Riddler has left for you. And what makes it even better is that he gets progressively more pissed off the more of them you complete, even to the point where he accuses you of cheating. And I don't mean you, Batman, I mean you, the player.
What? You're nearly done? Are you cheating? Looking them up on the internet? Tell me.
No! It's not how this was supposed to go!
Eventually, by completing his challenges, Batman is able to use his frequent calls to track him and send the authorities over his way, ensuring he'll be spending a little while in a cell again. But of course, he isn't the only bad guy you're trying to beat in the middle of all this chaos. Admittedly, they don't lead to much in the way of super fun bosses. Bane is just another Titan goon fight, but bigger, I guess. I swear Poison Ivy had a boss battle just like this in a Lego game at some point, and Harley? Poor Harley, man. She is treated with absolutely no respect in this game. You don't even really fight her. She just kind of sicks a bunch of thugs on you, and after Batman takes them out, he effortlessly locks her up. She's treated like such a dunce in this title.
Harley thinks she has me trapped in this chamber. She never was very bright.
That just doesn't sound right to me. This woman is brilliant. She has a PhD. She's just a little Fruit Loop for Frosted Flakes. No, wait, that's not how that joke goes. But thankfully, a lot of current media has been doing much better stuff with her now, so I guess I can live with this. What these guys are lacking in bosses, though, they often make up for with memorable encounters, with one of my favorites being trying to sneak through Killer Croc's lair while he listens for you in the vibrations of the water. He becomes more and more aggressive while you attempt to collect spores for an antidote at one point in the game. This section actually gets pretty tense, like I forgot how cool this was. But above all others, there was one villain in particular that left a huge impression, and the sections with him stand tall as some of the best moments of the entire game. Fairly early on in the game, one of the first inmates you see escape is Dr. Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow. After Batman inhales some of his fear toxin, he'll start to hallucinate and the deepest parts of his mind are explored. We have these kind of basic stealth sections where you have to creep up this tower to reach a bat signal, and these are fine, but they've got nothing on what leads up to them. Walking through doors to find yourself caught in a loop, opening up body bags to be taunted by the ghost of Bruce Wayne's greatest trauma, watching as the world shifts around him, slowly morphing into the dark memories, pushing his back and driving him forward. This stuff is genuinely creepy. Like, some of this imagery and psychological tactics wouldn't be far out of place in a game like Silent Hill. And the last encounter with the Scarecrow in particular helps drive something I think is really interesting in this game. The idea that Batman himself might belong in this place just as much as the supervillains that he's been sending here for years. At the back end of the 80s, there was a Batman story published called Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. Now, this game is not directly adapting this comic per se, but it is undeniable that it took some heavy inspiration from it, and while I don't want to too dive into this book because I really don't want to spoil too much about it, reading this thing has both made me appreciate the story of this game in ways I didn't before, and also makes me more disappointed in it. Over the course of the night, Oracle chimes in to help Batman piece together what's going on here, Joker's big play. As it turns out, there was a doctor at the asylum named Penelope Young who was developing an experimental compound derived from the venom in Bane's bloodstream that could be used to power up any human subjected to it. This is the Titan formula the Joker was using on his men throughout the journey. Joker was forcing Dr. Young to continue her research, but after she got cold feet and tried to back out, he hatched his plan to get himself into the asylum, take over the facility, and use its resources to finalize the formula and start creating an army of mutant Titan soldiers to wreak havoc and chaos all across Gotham. But now, I'm convinced there was just a little bit more to it than that. You spend a decent amount of the game just playing keep away, trying to keep research notes out of Joker's hands, trying to develop an antidote for the Titan, stopping Joker from using the facility's water supply to dump the toxin into Gotham City, and of course, trying to reach the Mad Clown himself while knocking in the teeth of every goon and supervillain that gets in your way. Once you make it to him though, he welcomes you as a guest of honor to his big party, trying to use the Titan formula on the Dark Knight to try and show him what it's like.
I just wanted to bring down your grim facade and for once let you see the world as I see it, giggling in a corner and bleeding. But you've denied me even that.
This line really stands out to me now, as after reading Serious Health, I was doing some more thinking about the facility these villains have been trapped in and what effect it was really having on them. I left out 2 collectibles you can find throughout the game that's technically counted as part of the Riddler's challenges. These audio logs holding parts of interviews with the major villains you face throughout the game, digging into a bit of their motivations and way of thinking, and the Chronicles of Arkham, the echoes of the mind and memories of the founder of the asylum, Amadeus Arkham. Things start out innocently enough as a man with a mission not only to imprison some of Gotham's most dangerous criminals, but to also try and understand, maybe even cure them. But this quest is set off by very dark and tragic events and eventually starts leading down a creepier and more ruthless road. He looks at these criminals with confusion, then pity, and eventually disgust. Maybe the cure, he thinks, isn't therapy or reconstructing their damaged souls, but bringing an end to their existence. And sometimes even that would be a mercy in comparison to his other solutions. You might start to notice something though. The voice ringing out from these echoes sound pretty familiar, and the timelines start to seem off. As you find more and more pieces of this story, he starts to mention characters you've seen in this very game, and eventually, he mentions the Bat. It becomes clear that this chronicle is not the story of one man's life, but two, and there's a man working behind the scenes of the asylum who has assumed the spirit of Amadeus Arkham and is convinced he's meant to carry out the man's original goals. And he's one of the first people in the game you encountered. After returning to find the warden of the asylum, Quincy Sharp, and confront him, he's not where you left him after rescuing him earlier in the game, only leaving behind his scribbles and insisting in his righteous intentions, wishing for the Batman's help in his crusade. What's even crazier is they even kind of foreshadow this. When you drop off Quincy in this room, you can also see one particular inmate being held in here, that being Clayface, almost like they were trying to give you a hint about the warden's duality. This stuff takes some liberties, but for the most part, it is taken straight from this book. Arkham Asylum is a bad place. It is, in and of itself, sick. And Batman is clearly intent on trying to rehabilitate the villains he encounters in hopes that they can be a benefit to their fellow man one day instead of just being a threat, but these are both stories about how this deranged and corrupt facility has not been effective in reaching that goal. The Batman has failed these people he was trying to help, and it's such a creepy, disturbing, but also really interesting take on this character. But my issue with how it's handled in this game is that within this story, our hero doesn't really learn anything. There's this one moment of the game where Batman shows a glimmer of humanity when dealing with one of his villains, looking up at Bane strung up on the ceiling and just asking,
Who did this to you?
It's a simple moment, but when I compare it to how he treats his foes during the entire rest of the game, he's just kinda cruel, maybe even needlessly so. He almost doesn't even treat them like people, looking at them like animals a lot of the time. They're just the bad guys. And I mean, yeah, they are evil, it's just, I don't know, I feel like the Batman was always just the guy that saw hope that people could be better, that a broken world could be fixed, that pain, loss, and sorrow could lead to a brighter path, a better path, and he wanted to show that not only to the people of Gotham, but also to the people he knows have suffered and let it drag them down and set them on the wrong road. This Batman just feels like he's lost sight of that, but it doesn't feel intentional. I don't know if this was the original intent, but I do kind of want to roll with my own personal belief that this was one of the Joker's motives for this whole night. It wasn't enough to just take over the asylum and complete his formula, create his army and all that junk. He needed Batman to be there too, to hear those tapes, to see how poorly equipped the doctors of the asylum were to help their inmates. You know what? No, their patients. Counselors losing patience with Edward Nygma, treating Waylon Jones as nothing more than a sewer-dwelling monster, easily falling into Poison Ivy's charms. I mean, come on, Harleen Quinzel was a doctor here, and look what happened to her. The pieces were laid out here tonight. The clues were on the table. Arkham Asylum doesn't help people, it doesn't rehabilitate, it's not a hospital, it's a factory creating monsters, and that's all Joker wanted Batman to see. I used to hate the fact that this game ends with the Joker injecting himself with a Titan formula while Batman uses the cure on himself, refusing to turn into a monster like his rival, but only during this most recent playthrough do I think I finally get it. Now, let's take a step back for a second. From a gameplay perspective, it's still pretty weak. You get a gauntlet of normal enemies to fight, pull down the Joker and avoid his attacks until you can punch him in the face and repeat the cycle until the final cutscene plays, but I guess this game has kind of established that you're not really coming here for the boss fights. Joker is seen slowly reverting back to normal after being beaten, but the transformation back is clearly very painful and it's taking a heavy toll on him. And I like that Bat sees his work is done here and immediately decides to head back into the city and fight the good fight, but now it almost feels like it punctuates perpetuates a sad conclusion that the cycle will just keep going. The inmates are taken back to their cells, it doesn't seem like the asylum will see a meaningful reform, and the monster assembly line is just back in full operation. This one just doesn't belong to the Joker. Now, I know a lot of this is coming from a very personal interpretation. Obviously, this was supposed to be an ending about how good will always triumph over evil, and Batman will never let the Joker win. He'll never let him change who the Dark Knight is, but it is hard to ignore that at least the plot of the game doesn't fully capitalize on some really intriguing and challenging ideas for this universe. But really, how could it? If things got better in this universe, then you really couldn't make a franchise out of it. And even if the plot didn't really reach its full potential, the game in this package deserved to be followed up. After a rant like that, I think it would be easy to think that I look at this game in a poor light, but not even close. I love Arkham Asylum. If this was a one-off project, maybe the conclusion could have been something closer to what I wanted, but this doesn't take away from how interesting I thought those other elements were, and it clearly doesn't diminish what a good game this is. The fantastic kinetic combat, the full realization of approaching each situation in the mindset of the Caped Crusader, the gorgeous attention to detail in the atmosphere, the sound design, the environment. I didn't even get to mention one of my favorite details where Batman's cape and suit become more beaten and tattered as the night goes on, showing just what a toll it's all taking on him. The core of the game is excellent. The exploration is fun and rewarding. Stuff like the challenge maps keep me coming back for more, wanting to perfect the combat and get as high a score as I can. Especially with the PS3 exclusive ability to play as the Joker in some of these stealth and combat challenges. Complete with his own unique animations and even gameplay style in some scenarios. Actually, a lot of work went into this. Why was this locked to the PS3? At least they remedied that with Return to Arkham. That port did do some things right. This is a wonderful gameplay experience, one that I keep coming back to years after its release. Sure, the bosses left a little to be desired. Sure, I wish the plot's conclusion stuck the landing a bit better, but I have a really good, but also pretty disturbing comic that I can read to get my fill for the story, and the gameplay more than makes up for the shortcomings. If you haven't already, please play Batman Arkham Asylum. It's going to be interesting looking at the rest of the games in this franchise, as they all kind of build off of this core pretty directly, so mechanically there might not be as much detail to get into, but I'll do my best. And don't worry, Digimon fans, I am getting back into that series in due time, but considering the next game in that lineup is this, it's going to take a lot of due time. So please bear with me while I talk about Batman till then. More exciting stuff is still on the horizon, and we may even have a few new frontiers to explore, but thank you all so much for supporting me along that journey. I cannot tell you how much it means to me seeing us blaze past the 10,000, more than 11,000 subscribers at this point. Thank you. If you want to keep supporting me, my Patreon might be the best way. The more people that are helping me out through there, the more and more time I can dedicate to this channel. For now, of course, remember that my top tier patrons get to see these videos 2 days early. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Sunset City, whichever you prefer. Links in the description, and of course, as always, spread the word, tell your friends, and until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. See you next mission. Hey there everyone, thank you so much for your patience and thank you so much for watching. This one did take me longer to get out than I thought it would, but mostly because it ended up being a meatier video than I expected, and I'm really not that disappointed about it, to be perfectly honest. I'm especially happy that it didn't take as long to get this video out as the last big project. That said, obviously working on the next Digimon World video, I am going to need to get some smaller stuff out in the meantime, so thank you for bearing with me until then. Of course, the greatest way to support me during that time is to share around my content, my channel, all of that good stuff, and of course, supporting me on Patreon. And I want to give a huge shout out to the people who have already done so, who continue to do so every single month, and I have to give a very special shout out to this month's top tier patrons. This month they are Brendan Hess, Christine Larkin, Earl Valco, Jeremiah Harrison, Joshua Davis, Letterick, McKenzel, Mr. SP, Wonton Photo, NBTV, Nickel Plated, Patricia Marcoux, Cinderin7, and Cirrus the Skeptic. Thank you guys so much. I love you all. You guys make this possible, and you make it worth it. See you next mission.